Hello and welcome to the Wedding Pro podcast, the podcast where we share tips and tricks for wedding vendors and couples, share insight into the wedding world, and share about our experiences. We are Gracie and Angela Felix of Felix Wedding Films. We are so glad you tuned into this week's episode. Now let's get into it. Well, I am so excited to have you on the podcast today, Frances. As you know, we are starting a new series, and it's called What Wedding Vendors Wish You Knew. And specifically today, it's What Wedding Stationers Wish You Knew. And we're so excited to have you on to share a lot about your business, about stationery, all the things that you wish vendors and couples knew. But before we jump into this week's episode, I'd love for you to kind of share with the listeners a little bit about you, when you started your business, where you're based, who you serve, whatever else you feel like we should know.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to tell you more about stationery. So, my name is Frances Ledgewood. I'm the owner of Ledgewood Fine Stationery. So, I'm based out of Huntsville, Alabama. So, I have lived in Alabama. I'm born and raised. So, I'm a Southern girl. And I originally got my start in stationery back in high school, which I hate to date myself, but that was 20 years ago. So I started working at a party store that sold invitations and wedding suites, and I was hooked. I loved it. So then I went to school for graphic design and marketing. Once I graduated, I just always did wedding stationery. And once my husband and I got married in 2014, we moved to the Huntsville area, which is about an hour and a half from my hometown of Florence, Alabama. So I quickly realized I didn't want to spend my life commuting back and forth to my stationery job in Florence. So I had several people wanting me to do their wedding invitations, and one thing led to another. And in 2015, Ledgewood Fine Stationery was born. So the word quickly got spread around town about me doing wedding invitations. And in my hometown, I was just kind of known for doing invitations. So I quickly started doing all the things. And my favorite part of stationery is definitely the wedding industry. Absolutely love save the dates, wedding invitations, all those beautiful day of details. And so for the past decade, I have ran my business. We have a team now, and we do anything and everything for wedding invitations, starting with save the dates to the wedding invitation suite to seating charts, welcome signs, all the pretty details, menu cards, place cards. And we love to assemble those, create those from scratch to really bring our clients and their vision to life through paper.
Thank you so much for sharing. I'm just so excited that you're on this podcast because I have been following along for a while on Instagram, and I see all your beautiful work. I see a lot of our vendor friends work with you. And so I was so excited when we were thinking about who should be on for this specific vendor category.
Yay!
I was like, I know the exact person. So we're super excited that you are here. And I'm just excited to learn more. I know that a lot of couples and then other wedding vendors might not understand the intricacies of wedding stationery. So I'm just excited for you to kind of like uncover a bit of that, and just like teach us all about what you do. But before we kind of dive in, I'd love to specifically talk to couples first, and then we can talk to vendors.
Okay.
So what are some things that couples often misunderstand when it comes to wedding stationery?
So there are lots of things, but I'll start with the very first being etiquette. So there's so many things about wording, how to include things, and that's why working with a professional stationer like myself is very handy, because we can educate and guide our couples to what is correct according to etiquette. And if they have tricky situations, or how to list their parents if they're divorced, like, we can help with all those questions without them having to do that on their own. So we're here to guide them through that. And one of the other things is really the quantity of invitations isn't how many people you're expecting at your wedding. This is one of the most common misconceptions, where it's like, I need 300 wedding invitations. So when someone tells me that, I automatically ask them, have you started on your guest list yet? Because it's actually how many households you have. So if you're expecting 300 guests, you're likely to only need around 150 invitations. So this is like, one of those things that we see a lot. So then it's like, oh, it's kind of like a light bulb moment for them where it's like, wow, I don't need that many. And that can drastically change what your budget is, how much you're going to spend, all those factors. So definitely like the quantity and working on your guest list. I call it the never ending guest list for a reason because it doesn't seem to end. People move, they break up, all these things. And so you're always having to edit this guest list, which also goes back to the etiquette, which is the first thing I mentioned, is because we can help you how to format that spreadsheet, how to address certain couples, how to spell things out, like all these things. We have a certain format we prefer the guest list just so once we either digitally print those addresses for you or work with our calligrapher, that they are just right. So we start on that from the beginning because this is something some of our clients, so they just want to pull their hair out because of the never-ending guest list. So let's start on that from the beginning, get that tackled. Once it's done, you could just kind of check that off your to-do list and not have to worry about it anymore. So etiquette, the envelopes, your addresses, and then also how much time you need just in general. So typically we start working with our brides typically like a year in advance. The wedding invitation, your save the dates, your paper goods can really establish your aesthetic for your wedding, your brand, your logo, your crest. All those things typically go throughout your entire wedding, even to the day of, even on the dance floor. So you have to think about this. You want to establish that at the beginning of your planning process. So working with a wedding stationer, we can chat about your color scheme, your ideas, what you like, what you don't like, and kind of hash all that out and then make something gorgeous that you love. And then you can carry that on throughout everything. Your wedding website can have your crest on it. Like all these little elements, you can make everything cohesive from the very beginning and then use it all the way till after your wedding when you're sending out your thank you notes that can also be branded for your wedding. So we just can really help just solidify your look for your wedding, for your style, and start that from the very beginning. So working with a wedding stationer from the moment you get engaged can really be wonderful because we do need that time to work on the design, to establish that relationship between one another. And then you need to think about production time, assembly time, all those little details that you typically might not think about, but those are time consuming. So it's better to get those done ahead of time versus on a time crunch because no one wants that stress added to their wedding planning. And so that is why working with a professional wedding stationer can just alleviate so many things that you don't necessarily need to add to your plate and just let them take care of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I love what you said that kind of reminded me of a question I was going to ask. So, what are like the biggest misconceptions when it comes to invitations, paper goods, and like specifically timelines?
Yes. So I joke that I don't like have a magic button that I push and it designs it and then it pops it out printed and ready. So typically with designing, that can really fluctuate due to how specific your design is, how many edits there are. I work with so many different brides. So my bride Olivia was like, here's your initial options. She said, I love number 7. It's perfect. Done. And I'm like, awesome. And then I work with this other bride and we go back and forth and back and forth, back and forth, back and forth until it is absolutely perfect. So you also have to kind of reflect on what kind of bride you are. Are you, and you may think you know what you want and you may get into that design process and you want something completely different. Like I can relate it to trying on a wedding dress. You may think and then you try it on and you end up with something completely different. Or on the flip side of that, you can try on the exact dress you want. It's what you envisioned. It's perfect. So it just depends on how swiftly you decide which design you want, how many edits we go through. So once we have the main invitation designed, that's when we'll start on the save the date options. So then they can coordinate with the wedding invitation. Then we'll move those into production first. Then we'll finish the entire suite for the wedding invitation. So once that's all designed, depending on your printing method is the next hurdle. So if it's digitally printed, which means smooth to the touch, those have a quicker, faster turnaround time. It's a different printing process. It goes a lot faster. If you want to go with something like letterpress, engraving, gold foil, any of the more luxurious printing methods, those take weeks, if not sometimes months in advance. If you want to add gold beveled edges, hand painted edges, all these frou-frou things that we love take time. So that's where we just have to be realistic about when's your wedding date, when do you want to mail these by, and all those things, those come into factor as to when we need to get started, when we need approval, when we need to production. Because then you have to think about assembly. If you're doing wax seal, ribbon, belly bands, gatefolds, I can keep going on about all these upgrades, the bells and whistles. And if you want to either assemble them yourself or have our team do them, you also need to factor that into your timeline because that is very labor intensive and very time consuming. So you just need to keep all these things kind of in the back of your mind as to realistic goals of how long these things take, because you're not ordering something on Amazon and it's going to be there in 2 days. We're humans, we're working, we're designing. I start with a white art board at the beginning of your wedding design, and then we bring it into something gorgeous that you can touch, feel, and mail to your guests. And that is just a lengthy process, but that's where having a longer engagement or working with us from the very beginning, it all plays into factor, and you can get all of this done seamlessly and stress-free.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. Do you feel like there's a sweet spot for when couples should inquire with you or their wedding stationer? Like, let's just say that they're planning their wedding in 2 years, which I know isn't as common, but it does happen. Should they go ahead and reach out to you at the 2-year mark, or would you say that there's like a better time frame, when it comes
They
to reaching out
can.
to a stationer?
They most certainly can, and go ahead and get on our design schedule. So it's like, if we're not going to be booked, you're already on our schedule. So that is very wise. What I have found is when someone books that far in advance, their color scheme or their style may change. So we don't
Mm-hmm.
want to completely design everything and then they change it. This has happened multiple times. And that's where it's like, you can do that, but then it's like, you're probably going to be paying additional, because if we're completely redesigning, that's starting from scratch again. So that's pretty much wiping clean the slate and then starting again. So you most definitely can do that. Most brides, we work usually anywhere from like 9 to 16 months in advance. And that's like a sweet spot. Definitely a year in advance is great, because it's like you can kind of take your time. It's not like you have to immediately respond to your revisions. You can enjoy the process. And I love that when our brides can enjoy it versus being stressed out about the timeline. But in reality, most of the time it's like, these need to go out, so, or they start
Yeah.
working with me and they are like, I wanted these out 2 weeks ago. And it's like, well, you just booked us today. So let's do the best
Yeah.
we can. And I'm here to make all the dreams come true, but there's only so much I can physically do, but I will do my best to get them done in a timely manner and to where they can get them out in their desired, time frame. And also with items like save the dates, there's a big buffer window of like when you can send those out, and so there's some grace period there with wedding invitations. You do want to get those out earlier. So those are more on a rigid timeline. But as long as, we know when the wedding is, when you need to get these out, we can swiftly work together, whether you have a long engagement or a shorter engagement, because not everybody has a long engagement. So, and we work with lots of brides that don't, and we, make it happen for them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes total sense. That's kind of what I thought that you might say. I was envisioning that if it's 2 years out, couples might not know exactly what even their colors could be. So I could
Right.
definitely see that changing.
Yes.
What do you think are some good questions that couples or planners, I guess either, should ask when they're inquiring with you? And is it mainly couples that inquire with you, or is it planners? How does that typically?
It's It's both. And I'm going to mix in mother of the brides. I work with
Okay,
lots of
yeah.
mothers of the brides, lots of planners, and lots of brides themselves. So it's like a mixture of those three. And honestly, it's probably like an even mixture of those three. So we work with all of them. And on our website, we have an inquiry page specifically for wedding planners so they can inquire on behalf of their bride. So then we know which planner we're working with, whether they want to include the bride or just work specifically with the wedding planner, because every wedding planner we work with does things a little bit different. They do it their own way, which is great. And so we just figure out, okay, I'm only working with the planner, or okay, I'm working with the planner and the bride's also included, or the bride completely takes this over and the planner's just kind of copied on the emails, so we see all of it. And then we also work with brides themselves that they may even have a planner, but the bride is, I'm working with several right now. They love paper. So they are like steering the car, like, and the planner's just there for the ride. They're in the passenger seat for right now, so the bride knows what she wants. So, and on those, on our inquiry page, the bride can submit an inquiry for herself, or the mother of the bride, for the bride. So we work with all of those. And typically what we like to know up front is obviously the wedding date, the quantity, because that just helps us, if they want a certain printing method. And we love getting inspiration pictures of kind of like what they have in mind. And then we kind of take it from there. And then what we'll do is we'll make an inspiration board. We'll make 3 different collections for them to choose from. So then they can pick which works best for within their budget. Or if they want to upgrade to certain embellishments, we can always add on to whatever they picked out.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. And do you feel like you get a lot of similar questions from the brides or mothers or planners? Are there any things that you can think of that in the inquiry form they submit it, or when you're going back and forth, it's a common question?
I feel like we really do our best to try to answer any questions before they have them. Most of the time, really, and we've really nailed down our process to where we really try to get all like I said, the wedding date and the quantity, those are the big ones. And if we know those right off the bat, their color scheme, we love knowing all of those things, but really we can kind of just take it from there. So if they do have questions and they want to hop on a Zoom call or a phone consultation, that's also wonderful, because then we can sit, we can chat, we can get to know each other, and then we can really kind of hash out all the details and any questions they may have. Each bride is unique, and they do, bring their own, flavor to the table and to the conversation. But for the most part, I guess there's not really any question that keeps arising, because we really try to nail those before they have those questions. The main thing is usually like if their parents are divorced, how to like put that on there, or if a parent is deceased, those kind of tricky situations for the wording, we can guide those. And most of the time it's always about the spreadsheet. Like, how do you address this person? Or if they're a judge, like all these things that pop up while they're working on it. And that's typically when once they're in the nitty gritty of doing the spreadsheets, that's when the questions arise.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. And so do you, like, when couples are trying to figure out who their stationer is and they inquire with you, maybe they inquire with someone else, that's typically how it goes.
Yeah.
There's at least multiple vendors being chosen from. How do you, I guess, what is the process for once they inquire? Do you always hop on a call? Do you send out a proposal with a design? Do you wait to design until after they book? Because, there could be
Right.
complications there. What is that process?
Absolutely. So once they inquire, we get their quantity, the wedding date, we get inspiration pictures. If you have a Pinterest board, send it our way, just so we can kind of get the vibe that you want. And then what we'll do is we'll work up an inspiration board, which is pictures of previous invitations we have designed that kind of fit their color scheme or their aesthetic or just kind of their overall look. It's not saying this is what we're going to do for you, but it's saying you've made it this far to where you're interested in working with us. Here's some beautiful invitations that fit your vibe, and then we'll go from there. So then we send that inspiration board along with the 3 different collections for pricing for them to choose from. So there's like a base price, then there's the middle package that kind of adds a few other things, and then there's that third package where it's like, we are assembling, we are stuff stamping, sealing, mailing. We are doing everything for you. You are completely hands off. We will ship you a keepsake sweet box and some extras for you to have on your wedding day. So most all of our brides and clients go with collection 2 or 3 because they want us just to handle it for them. And then on that, we also send pricing for save the dates. So if you want to add those, you can add those on. And then once we start designing, so what that looks like is, so once they say, yeah, I'm ready to book, we send a contract, a deposit. Once those are paid, we send out an amazing welcome box with samples and with some goodies for our brides. And so this just lets them see and touch and feel samples. And so we work with brides all over the United States. So if someone's in California, here we're in Alabama, they can see, like, they can feel, they can touch, they can see all the beauty of what they're seeing on our Instagram or on our website, but now they have something tactile that they can touch and open and look at. And so if that bride wants to have a Zoom consultation or a phone consultation, we can then walk through the welcome box with them and kind of chat about all the details. Now, some brides, they don't need that. They're good. I'll start working up their initial wedding proofs, and then we'll just go from there. So we definitely let it be to what works best for the bride and what she wants. So if she wants a Zoom consultation, let's do it. If she doesn't, that's fine. We'll get started. For the most part, I've been doing this now for 2 decades where I talk to you, I see what you want, and I am so ready to design, and I can work up some beautiful options just from gathering, where your wedding is, what time it is, what your colors are, all those things. And then I'll just do my thing and start designing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense, because I was wondering, when does the designing start? Because if you show a design of this is what it could be, then what if they
Yes.
just take that before booking? So
Oh,
that makes sense.
and that's happened to me, back when I very first started my business, was so excited, designed a whole suite, and then it was crickets. And I always wondered, and I don't know that personally know this bride. And honestly, I don't remember what her name was, but I know I have her file in my Dropbox. So it's like, did you use those designs?
Yeah. Did you end up printing this?
Yeah. So it's like, I'm pretty sure you did. So that's where lessons are learned. We have contracts, and we have deposits. So it's in the thing why we do this is because if you think about me spending my time to design something for someone that is not officially on my schedule, it's very unfair for my brides that are on my schedule. And that's how I have to look at it, because it's like, I want the best for my brides, and to take time away from them for someone that may not end up using me, we don't do that. So that's where we send that inspiration board. You get the idea, we can make some beautiful stuff. Here's the pricing if that works for you, if you're ready. And then once they get their welcome box, they're usually overjoyed with excitement. And then they're like, let's go, and then we'll start on the design. So that's when we'll email, these multiple wedding invitation proofs, and they'll look at them and, they may be like, I love this option. It's perfect. Or I like the font on number 2, the layout on number 3, the logo on number 4, So we work back and forth until we get the invitation absolutely perfect. And then we design all the other elements to coordinate with the main invitation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes total sense. So I would love to know, like, how does wedding stationery impact their guests' experience from like the beginning to all the way to the wedding day? And like, you can talk about stationery that you do that's physically visible on the wedding day. Anything that comes to mind for that question?
Absolutely. So your save the date and the wedding invitation is like the absolute first glimpse someone gets of your wedding day. So if they receive a beautiful save the date on wonderful paper with a beautiful liner. Their names are printed. It's got beautiful, postage on there. Once they receive that in their mailbox, it's just something they can they can immediately be like, oh, like this is nice. And most of the time they go on your refrigerator, they put it on their calendar, So that's the first thing, is the save the date. So now the wedding invitation is kind of like the grand finale, So once you have some beautiful wedding invitations, say you're having, a luxury wedding, you're going all out for everything, and you send out like a flimsy, not so pretty wedding invitation. If they receive that, it's kind of like, okay, like this is kind of what the wedding's going to be like. But if you're getting married at this beautiful venue, you're having lush flowers, this plated dinner, and you receive a 3-ply engraved wedding invitation in your mailbox, you're going to open it and say, whoo, I'm RSVPing right now,
Yeah, I'm going
and
to that wedding.
Yeah, like I'm not missing that, let's get a babysitter because mommy and daddy are having a day night, So, and I've been on the receiving end because several of my friends have had these beautiful weddings, and we've had the honor of doing their wedding invitations. And when I've received something in the mail and I'm like, oh, like, let me open this. And I immediately put that response back in the mailbox, mail back response card, or go to their wedding website to respond, because it's like, I don't want to miss this wedding. So just to feel that on my own, and then to know, like, you want your guests to have that excitement before they've even stepped foot at your wedding. You're pouring all this time and effort and love and money into this day. Like, you want to set that tone from the very beginning, and how you do that is through gorgeous wedding invitations. And then, like you mentioned, like, you bring it all the way to the day of, menu cards, place cards, a gorgeous seating chart, fans or programs, I could just go on and on. I love the details. And then having those coordinate with your save the dates and your wedding invitations, it's like a full circle moment of just beauty and just a very cohesive, gorgeous wedding that's just centered around you and your now husband, so everything is just seamless from the very beginning all the way to the end.
Mm-hmm. This will show how much I know about stationery, but do you, as the stationer for the invitations and just like all of that, do you do also all the paper goods on the wedding day? Like you said, like the menus and like anything that has to do with paper?
Yes.
Or is that a separate vendor? Okay.
No. So that will be us. Like, we even do like cups,
Okay, cool.
napkins, koozies, like all the
Nice.
things. And so, and it's funny talking about koozies, like so many like of my friends are like on the other side of the United States are like, we have never done a koozie. And I'm like, all our brides in the South do koozies. So it's like a drink hugger. Someone listening doesn't know what that is. And so, but
funny.
yeah, so we do all those things like drink menus, all those things. And so typically how this works is, once we've done the wedding invitations, the save the dates, we'll send out a form for day of details. And it's a hefty form, but we don't want, like, no stone left unturned or whatever that saying is. So you'll go through this form and fill it out for everything you're interested in. And then we'll make an estimate based on everything you filled out. And then we can tweak that until it's exactly what the bride, the planner, the mother of the bride wants for the ceremony and the reception. So then once they've filled that out, they've approved the estimate, they've paid the deposit, then we will start moving into design for the day of details. Because a lot of these items need to be produced ahead of time, whereas some are like right before, the seating chart, the place cards, those are like week out, so like those things, it's like we can just keep rolling stuff into production as needed. The guest book can go into production months in advance, the seating chart a week in advance, but we know when those things need to happen. So we'll move those into production, and that's where those either ship directly to the bride, or she's working with a planner directly to the planner. And then their team will take, initiative to place the menu cards, put up the seating chart. So physically for my business, I'm not there on the day placing those items, but someone working the wedding is the one doing that after we've given them those items.
Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah. That makes sense. I'm connecting things now.
Yeah.
So I before we wrap up about couples and like get into, what vendors should know about
Yeah.
stationers, is there I'll ask one more question and then I'll ask our listener question. But is there anything else that we haven't talked about yet in relations to couples that you feel like they should know about wedding stationery? Broad question, but anything that comes to mind.
My main thing would be just to account for the time it takes. Go ahead and start looking into it when you get engaged, kind of start seeing what you like, and then reaching out to stationers you're interested in working on, seeing if they're available for your wedding date, if it works within your budget, all those things, just kind of start that conversation. If you're working with the planner, they'll start that conversation early because they want to get that design as well. So that's just one of those things is I would just start early on in the process to kind of start getting your mind around what you have envisioned so then we can start bringing it to life for you.
Mhm. Awesome. And then our one listener question that we're
Love
going
it.
to feature. So I know that obviously you work with couples and planners a lot, and obviously you're a professional stationer. But this listener asks, if a couple can't afford to hire a professional stationer, what tips do you have for them to still have nice wedding invitations?
Definitely. So we get lots of DMs, messages and emails, and unfortunately we don't work well with their budget. What I always tell them to do is like, you're in the right spot to follow along for inspiration. See what you like, what you don't like. If you want ribbon or if you want assembly, if there's a craft store or Hobby Lobby or Michael, go check out their ribbon selection. See, you can get crafty, and take it on and do it yourself. A lot of stationers find their love for stationery as designing their very own wedding invitations. Like that's a lot of people's stories that have now become very amazing stationers. So if you do enjoy, being artistic and crafty, dive in. If that's not you, maybe you have a family member or a friend that is, and you can see if they can help you with that. But I definitely feel like getting inspiration from, Ledgewood Fine Stationery, or we get lots. We're on TikTok too, and we get lots of DMs like, well, what about this or what? It's like, well, follow along. You can see, you can learn by watching others, and then maybe you can see if you can make something in your budget maybe, and stuff like that, like you would want to go with a digital, like there's just things I know you'd want to go with a digital print to save on costs for, letterpress or engrave, there's things like that that can also keep the budget down, not have as big of a guest list. All these things, once again, play into factor of budgeting.
Mhm. Yeah, that makes total sense. Well, thank you for answering that. I'm sure our
Yeah,
listener will appreciate that. Awesome. Well, we can go ahead and kind of wrap up our section about couples. I'd love to get into talking about vendors, what we wish they knew, kind of like uncovering things on that side. But I would love to know, how do you feel like vendors misunderstand stationery? Are there things that you feel like are common misconceptions among vendors? Anything that you can think of for that?
hmm. That's a good question. I feel like I can tell that when I'm working with a seasoned wedding vendor that they know their stuff, and then when I'm working with a vendor that might not have worked with so many, either not, I don't even know if it's just stationers, but they have so many questions. And like I said earlier, I try to answer any questions before they come about. But like recently, I was working with someone and I was just like, do I need to fly there and do, assemble? Like it was just like really almost like common sense things that I was having to explain. And so that's where it was like, you just don't ever know. Like you can't assume someone knows how to put a print inside of a frame, like things like that, like I've had to deal with. And it's like, Well, when we're saying it's a print, it's a piece of paper, and you would frame it, versus it being, if it's acrylic, it can have a stand, so it's like sometimes, and that is where I know, I mean, I've been doing this for so long, it's just like, I know it like the back of my hand, it's second nature. If this is someone's first wedding they're planning, they may not understand that an 8 by 10 print means, and, I put in parentheses, you would frame the, they might just not understand those things, or they just want it done. And if they want it done, then we can take care of framing it for you, so I think those things is just really communication. And then also, like, I am not there on the wedding days. So that is one thing that's very different for wedding stationers from basically every other wedding vendor, is they're there on the wedding day and we're not. So if something it goes wrong or is incorrect, we don't know unless you tell us, so that's where it's like, we just need that communication as to what your expectations are, or, if you needed something else. Like, the main thing is to talk to us, because otherwise we're not there and we don't know if something, was different than what you expected it to be, which doesn't very much happen often, but when it does, we just need to know about it. So, and that's another thing, is since we're not there on the wedding days, is most of our relationships are strictly through phone calls, text messages, and email threads, so some of these wedding vendors that I'm so close with, I have not even met in person because we work together all the time. But since I'm not there on the wedding day, I'm not there, hands-on. I'm doing hands-on stuff months in advance. And I think that can be another kind of hot topic, is like, like, how my brain is wired is, this needs to go into production. This is going to take this long into production, this and that. And it's not always, once you approve it, it's done. And so that's where I think maybe other vendors need to know, like, we have to, get this file print ready. We have to submit it. We have to actually print it. We have to quality check it. We have to count it. We have to wrap it. We have to ship it. So there was just 7 other steps after you said approved. So that's where it's like, and you don't need to know all those things, but as a vendor, you need to maybe set those expectations, like, okay, and that's where I also try to say, save the dates. If you're going digital print, that's about a 2-week turnaround. I want people to know that as well. But just because you say approved doesn't mean it's shipping out that afternoon, because that is just not realistic.
That makes sense. Do you have any like hot takes when it comes to like wedding vendors and anything of that sort?
This isn't necessarily a hot take. It's a pet peeve. So I'll spill the tea. The word stationery, when talking about paper goods, is spelled Stationery. So you can think of it as like an envelope, starts with the letter E, and it's most commonly misspelled ARY. And that stationery means just something like sitting on your desk versus like paper goods. So many times when vendors across the board will tag a stationer, and they'll put stationery and they'll tag, which is amazing, but stationery is spelled ARY. And in the wedding industry, I feel like this needs to be known by all vendors, the correct way to spell stationery. So that is ERY and not ARY. And this is also in our business name, is Ledgewood Fine Stationery, which is also commonly misspelled. So I love it to educate people on the correct way of spelling it. And once you know, you can just spell it correctly from here on out. So that is just something more of a hot take on spelling, on grammar. So that is the correct spelling for stationery, and us stationers love it when you spell it correctly.
That is something that when you told me that, I looked back at our posts on Instagram and I'm like, did I spell it right? There were some that I had to fix. I was like, okay, I now understand that I need to learn grammar.
Well, and I remember when I very first started working, I mean, I was 16 in the party store, and the owner of the store educated me. She told me, how to spell it. And so also, my name is Frances, and it's ES. Like the female version of Frances is ES, the male version is IS. So my name is also commonly misspelled. So I always also tell people my name is with an E, and so is Stationery with an E. So you can just think of Frances and Stationery. They both have E's. But yeah, it's definitely something I feel like once you've been corrected, you'll remember it, from there on
Mm-hmm.
out.
Yep. Yep. I am always going to spell it correctly. Well, do you feel like there's anything else that you wish that wedding vendors knew about wedding stationery?
I would say that it really does set the tone, and it goes hand in hand with beautiful design, and it can really, they go hand in hand. So, like, when planning or, working at a beautiful wedding, like having this beautiful stationery, whether it's signage, invitations, it all works together. So, we want to work with you, not against you. We love our brides' weddings so much. Like I get so excited about designing these invitations, and it's almost like it's my own wedding all over again. Like we pour so much time, energy, blood, sweat, and tears into these designs. So we care so much. And even though we're working months in advance behind the scenes, we are so excited to see how these vendors bring it all together for the day of. And I just can't wait to see Instagram and your stories. And I'm like, I want to see how it's all brought together. So as a stationer, I can speak for myself. We are so excited to see how it all comes together. And we're just so excited when it happens. And I have literally cried after a wedding because I have loved working with my clients so much. And this means we're not going to have our daily communication with each other or weekly communication. So we deeply care. And I'm a very sentimental person. So stationery is just, it's very sentimental to me. And I love seeing it carried on throughout all those beautiful details of the wedding day. And a photographer and a videographer, they capture that, and that's so remarkable and so talented, and it's just amazing to see like through their eyes and through their lens what they capture of what we created. So it's really special for us, and I know for our clients as well.
Mm-hmm. I love that. Well, we love good details.
Yay!
So as we kind of wrap things up, are there any final thoughts that you have that you want to share either to couples or vendors or just in general, anything that you haven't said that you want to get out there about wedding stationery?
Think for starters, like if anyone ever, like client or bride or planner or vendor, if anyone ever has a stationery question, shoot me a DM or email me, submit an inquiry. I love talking about paper. I am very passionate about it. And it's one of those things where sometimes it is so second nature to me that something I may assume you may not know. And so if you don't, ask me about it. I would love to further the conversation or explain to you, why this printing method is more expensive than this printing method. So many things, it's literally from scratch with what we start. So that's where it's like there's so many different steps to get to that final beautiful suite that you see that a photographer took on the wedding date that you would have no idea that someone started working on that 9 months ago, So it's just like, so all those things, like it's time consuming, but it's made with love and art and, all these things and wrapped together with etiquette. And like, so working with a custom stationer, you're going to get that love of paper and etiquette and all things like that. And it's truly a value to add to that wedding. And so many clients of ours, like we just make such great relationships, and that's so special. And so I don't know, it's just like the wedding industry is such a relationship based community, and we just love those relationships we make. So if it's a planner or a wedding vendor I've never spoken with, I would love to further the conversation. Or if you're a bride that has questions, I'm here. I'm an open book. I would love to chat more about whatever questions you have.
Awesome. And where can people find you? Social media, website, email, all that?
Yes, so our website is ledgewoodfinestationery.com. And now that you know, it's stationery with an ERY. And our Instagram, TikTok, Facebook is all at Ledgewood Fine Stationery. And my personal email is francis@ledgewoodfinestationery.com. So if you want to shoot me a email, you can, or you can submit an inquiry and I would love to chat further, or you can shoot me a DM on Instagram or TikTok and we can chat.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. I've really loved this conversation. I'm sure our listeners will love it as well. And I will talk to you later.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for listening to the Wedding Pro podcast. If you found this episode helpful, we would love it for you to share with a fellow vendor or someone who's getting married soon. Your support means the world to us and helps us reach more people in this amazing industry. We'll see you next time.